What's up, Lindsay? I know we were trying to do this like months ago, and I'm happy that we are finally getting to do this now on like a Monday morning with some coffee in our hands.
Love it. Love it. Well,
Love it.
actually,
I
I already
know.
chugged my coffee.
So I think it's first, let me say, like Lindsay's been with me for 3 years, basically, getting close to 3 years. And it's just wild to see where you started. We're going to go through all these phases. And like for you listening, I want this to be an episode where you see what is truly possible without setting these like crazy, outlandish goals that you see on the internet, right? Because I think that when people invest in coaches and whatever, we're bombarded. And I mean, I'd love to know, even just from your perspective of like business coaches messaging you, but just we're bombarded with this like Lamborghini and Rolex and champagne showers and 0 to 10K in 3 seconds. I mean, do you still see that stuff today?
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, I think being in the world that we're in, our algorithms are probably very different than the standard, Gen Pop who's just like on their Instagram. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, no, I see a lot from fitness coaches, I see a lot from business coaches, I see a lot of different courses, a lot of different ads. I feel like my ads, as far as like business coaching, has kind of been blowing up recently. And yeah, it is a lot of that, like, just this, we need to try this one strategy or whatever in order to like bring in like 10K, 20K months. And so, yeah, no, I see it all the time.
And I bring
Yeah.
that up because when we first met, and we'll kind of dive into what that looked like, but this was back in 2021, and she was still in the military. She was married and just was like in the middle of kind of growing her family. And I know that the idea of starting a business was something you wanted, but you've always been like a long-term thinker, and stability is what you want. And I think that's what we all want, but you were very, very set on like, I don't want to make a decision until I'm like 100% ready to go. And I've seen you go from saying no on a sales call to now running a six-figure business and ultimately quitting your job, leaving the military, and all of the things. So I want to kind of break that down and just give some parents out there perspective on what this looks like, because I mean, I forget, but how old was your son when we first started?
He was, man, so I think we started working together in like the summer of 2021. So he was probably almost one. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, yeah.
I was
So
gonna say,
almost
like, it's
one.
always been like toddler phase, which I feel like is like the hardest, and you were balancing everything. But like, I mean, we're talking like small, young kids, and not like,
Right.
10-year-olds, right? Where they're like
Yeah.
somewhat self-sufficient. And then you had another baby in the middle of this all. So we'll go into all of that, but let's just first like go back to what you were feeling when you and I were first DMing and really diving into this idea of starting your business and potentially investing. And I think you knew you had like a year left in the military, but just tell me what life looked like then for you, your husband, your family.
Yeah. It's really wild to like think back on it because it almost just, it feels like there was something like a vision that I had been like working towards for so long. And now that I'm like there, it's like wild to think that I ever thought differently. But yeah, so 2021, I was an officer in the military. At the time, I was pretty sure I was going to get out of the military, but I had no really like I'd been into health and fitness for a long time. I've been kind of helping my friends and things like that. And I had this kind of like opportunity to help someone else in their business. And so I was like, all right, like, let me get my certification, just like do this officially. But then I quickly realized that the niche that I was helping them with, it was just not what I was passionate about. And so I knew I really wanted to focus on like women and mindset and like habits and all of that. And so I kind of was like, all right, let me just kind of go on my own. And you found me like very quickly into that kind of like transition. So I was like very new. And at the time, I would say I had literally no like concept of turning this into a full-time thing. It was literally just a hobby and truthfully a way for us to make extra money at that point because we were paying off like a ton of student debt, and I knew that we were trying to like move and all these things and trying to set up our lives for after the military. So at that time, really in my brain, it was just like, hey, if there's a way that I can do something that I enjoy and like make extra money, like this is awesome, right? And so I started working with you, took FCA, and honestly, like as soon as I started and I started getting clients, and I was like, am I allowed to cuss on this podcast? I was like, oh shit, like this is really like could really be something. And I think for people who've been in the health and fitness world for a while, like maybe had coaches and all these things, you already know like people do this full time. I feel like I was very naive at that point where I didn't know that people just did this for a living. Like I don't know any entrepreneurs in my personal life. Like I don't know anybody who does that. No family, no friends. And so it was all just wild to me. And I was like, well, let's just kind of see where this goes. And at the time, I actually had 2 years left on my military contract, almost 2 years. And I was like, well, maybe we'll just kind of like work on it. I'll go slow and steady. And if it ends up being that I can basically replace my military income, maybe I will do this full time after the military, which, and like, I don't know if you deal with a lot of people who struggle with this, but I think there was a big piece of me that was like, why would I give up my years of education and schooling and something completely different? Like going through, being in the military for almost 10 years and then getting like a master's and like data and all this stuff. I always just assumed that I would get out of the military and pursue that because that's what I had all my formal education in. Right. And so I think for a while I struggled with the concept of like, well, I'm not using my like formal education.
It's like
So
identity
is
though. You know what I'm saying? Like that was your
that
identity.
yeah,
It's not even like at least for me, like it wasn't even like a money waste. It was like everyone knows you as a TV reporter. This is your identity. This is your thing. And like, yeah, people know that you're the fit TV reporter, but it almost felt like lesser than to be like, I'm a coach now. Like it didn't feel as cool or
yeah,
respectable.
yeah. No,
Yeah. So I mean,
1000%.
yeah, there was like this ego. And I want to ask you though, because we skimmed over the fact that like you did not just directly join FCA, right? Like you thought about it for a second. And I bring that up because you were taking into consideration, okay, I have a son that's less than one. I'm in the military for at least another, let's say 2 years, asterisk. But
Yeah.
and again, you literally, I mean, jokes aside, if you guys have followed me for a bit, like Lindsay wrote on her notes app, like what she wanted to send to me before she sent it to me after a sales call, basically saying, hey, I think you're great. Long story short, it's just not for me right now. And then within 48 hours, like you ended up joining FCA. So I want to know like what was going through your head because so many moms that I talk to say no because they think it's the responsible thing to do for their family. And I want to know kind of what you were thinking in that moment.
I think, to be honest, like, and this was never, I understand people that have spouses that aren't supportive. Like, it was never even that. Like, because my spouse has always been super supportive and I'm so grateful for that. Um, it was really just a lot of, for me, I think, confidence. So it was imposter syndrome. Can I really do this? Should I really spend this much money? Am I going to make the money back? Again, like I said, we're trying to pay off student loans. That was going to like set us back a couple months. I think most of it was just imposter syndrome. Like this is for other people, not for me. Other people are entrepreneurs, other people build successful businesses. But then I think I binged your podcast and I think like I ended up signing up because like I messaged you and was like, I just binged your podcast. Like, let's do this. Like, I just need to do it. Um, so I think, and I'm kind of an impulsive buyer, but like when I know what I want and I like kind of come to that decision, like I don't want to wait anymore. But no, I think it was mostly just imposter syndrome and just the belief that this was for other people and that I needed to continue to do something that was very secure and stable, like the military, like I had been in for the past, 9 years or whatever, that I needed to find something that was just as secure as that. Because to me, security and stability was like the main thing because I was not somebody who had a spouse who could like kind of carry the financial burden of our entire family. Like it had to be a team effort. It had to be two of us. Right. So I think I was just very hesitant in that sense. But then I was like, you know what? If other people are doing this, like, why can't I do it? Like, I think I'm a very capable person. I think I'm smart. I think I'm driven, all these things. Like, why not just give it a shot and see what happens? So,
And you weren't chasing, like, I think it's really important too. When you first start your business in general, if you're like, while you're listening to this, the idea is not, I'm going to make as much money as possible. The idea is, I'm going to do this and see if it sticks. And I'm going to give my absolute all to it, right? And that's still to this day why I don't sell like 0 to 6 figures in FCA. Do we have people that do that? Sure. But like realistically, I'm looking to get you some traction more than average that basically would give you the courage and confidence to quit your 9 to 5. So I
Mhm.
know this was a while ago. We've obviously made a ton of changes, but when you joined FCA, I mean, realistically, what did the next 6 months kind of look like for your business? Like to walk me through kind of like the progress you're making.
So, well, before that, I want to say, because you made me think of something like the people focus so much, I think, on income and like how much money you can make. And I've heard this from other coaches. They're like, well, what do you desire your monthly income to be? And I'm like, if I'm being 100% honest, it's less about the money and more about the lifestyle. Like, it's not, I could be bringing in, you know, 50K months or whatever, but then paying a whole team or like, it doesn't affect I want a specific lifestyle. And that's what we try to, I feel like, grain in people in FCA as well, is like, and you do this really well in the beginning, is like, picture your life a year from now, 3 years from now. What do you want that to look like? Work backwards from that. And I feel like starting working with you, that was always my vision, is like, and my husband and I talked about that a lot. Like, what do we want our actual life to look like in 2 years, 3 years? And all of that was having more autonomy after coming out of the military and always being told where to live, what job to take, what uniform to wear, all the things. I just wanted more ability to make decisions in my own life. And what better way to do that than being your own boss? And so that was really like exciting for me. But as far as like that first 6 months in FCA, I think when you found me, I was like working with a couple clients. I was way undercharging. I think I was charging like $100 a month for all the things I was doing. And so really that first 6 months, I think I was really able to like enhance what I was offering on the coaching side and just be like, okay, getting all my systems set up, all the apps, like so that I was delivering like a really premium service. And then subsequently able to like charge more because like I knew what I was offering to people and how I was giving them like a lifestyle change. And then I think because I started putting myself out there on social media, people kind of started coming out of the woodwork from my past, or like old friends or old coworkers who, were like interested in working with me. And again, that kind of propelled my like excitement and drive for this whole thing. So I was like, wait a minute, like people actually want to work with me. They're like literally paying me to help them with their health. I'm like, this is the most exciting thing ever because I want to do this like all day long. So I think that was the first realization in that first couple months, was just like getting all those systems in place to make sure that it was like very smooth. And then realizing, oh crap, like people want to pay me. Like this is kind of cool. Maybe I should keep going and see what happens.
And again, you've always been like, that's the thing, like, you know, when you're first starting your business, really in that first 1 year or so, as much as you might hate the marketing strategies that you hear about or hate the DM process, like those things worked. And, the first 10 clients or so you get are likely not strangers on the internet. They are likely people that have followed you since high school or college. Maybe you forgot they existed. They're coworkers, they're friends of friends, right? Like they're coming to you. And I think that so many coaches, I just want them to understand that, because here you are working a full-time job, balancing a full-time family, and starting your business and getting clients, right? Realistically, how many hours a week were you investing in your business in those first, like in the first year? What would you say like time spent to your business was?
In the first year, I would say probably somewhere 20, 25 hours a week, I would say. I don't think that that's like recommended for everybody who maybe wants to scale much quicker, but I think I knew I had longer because I had a 2-year contract left in the military. So I was like, obviously I was still working full time, taking care of my family, but I did a lot of work on the weekends, a lot of work at night. And so it probably added up, I would say, probably to an additional, on top of what I was already doing, like an additional 20, 25 hours. Now, as I grew more and like was getting ready to leave the military, I was working a lot more, like at least like 30, 35 hours, like as I was making that transition. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I say that because, you are somebody where your back wasn't against a wall, right? Like, even though you wanted to leave the military, you weren't so miserable that it was just so taxing. And when you know that you have to be in there for another few years, I mean, why would you build a multi 6 figure business and you don't have time? Like, you physically couldn't have done that. And so I share that because you're saying 20 to 25 hours a week with a full-time job with a child under the age of 1, and you made that possible. And we're going to dive into the mom aspect of things at some point too, but I want to keep this timeline going of like your scale, right? So then let's go to your first six-figure year, right? When you first realized, wow, we just brought in six figures. This is crazy. Because I think that was like the first full year together, not like timeline,
Yeah.
I think what 2022 was your first six-figure year.
Well, definitely in the first year of us working together, I definitely hit like those like 8K months. So for sure. And which is why I was like, I remember you messaging me and being like, congrats on like securing your six-figure year. And I'm like, oh crap. But then like it was, yeah, with the second year, I was like, that's
Oh
crazy.
crap.
Oh crap. The first year, I think I made somewhere around like 80,000 or whatever. And then the next year was the full first year that I actually secured like above that six-figure mark, which to me was like, that's really making six figures. Like you could make 8K 1 month and not have like a six-figure year. So yeah, it was the second full year that I actually brought in like, a six-figure plus
Yeah.
salary. So
And during that year, right, that's when you had your second baby. And so
oh
I
yeah.
think that's important to also share is that you were still doing all the mom things. So walk me through what that kind of balance in your world looked like. How were you balancing mom, business, exiting the military, things like that?
If I'm being like totally transparent, there wasn't a lot of balance in that. Like I would say the final 2 years of like me getting pregnant, having the baby, and then like transitioning out of the military, the whole thing was like probably 18 months to 2 years, like that whole transition. And like I did work a lot. Like that's I did work a lot, but I knew, especially as I saw that the business was like what I wanted to be doing after the military, I was like, I have to continue to grow and sustain this. And so I was willing to put in the extra work. And a lot of times, it's not that I would work all weekend, and I did have boundaries, like, and I things like I wouldn't answer my clients like on the weekends and things like that. But was I going to the coffee shop like during nap time for several hours to write content or write programming or whatever? Like, yes, I was. And so I don't think I really took like a full day off for a very long time, which probably contributed to some of my like adrenal issues later on. But at the same time, I'm like, there was like a trade-off because I worked a lot and I'm grateful that I did because I don't know how I could have gotten to where I am now had I not done that. And now I'm all healed and we're good. So
I mean, jokes aside with the adrenals, right? Because I mean, I obviously have dealt with those things too. And I think that just being a female, we are obviously so much more susceptible to having those problems. But I bring this up because whether you are a mom or just a new entrepreneur in general, like there isn't going to be balance in the way that we think of work-life balance, right? And I think it's really important to understand that like if you love what you do, you're going to easily put in 50 hours a week. Like, I just think it flies by sometimes. I mean, I can work a 10-hour day and I'm like, whoa, how is it already dark outside? Like, it just happens and you don't realize it. Now, obviously, managing burnout is one thing, right? But I do think that burnout cycles are just shorter in that first 1 to 2 years of your business because you're always hustling. So even if you're taking, you're not taking a day off, I'm sure you had lighter days where it's a few hours where you're just doing some content, DMs, and things like that. But, I find that new business owners in particular, they're clinging to have a weekend off while
Mhm.
working a 9 to 5. And it's like, that's not possible. Like, you know what I mean? I think it's important to say that like you're gonna have a lot more sacrifices in those first few years to get what you want later. And I think that you're proof of that. So I just would be curious to hear kind of what your take on that is.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important to keep that vision front and center because and again, like I did have a supportive partner and so I think a lot of times like we talked about that vision, like what we wanted long term and that was always something that we were like, look, we're willing to, and there's some things that we talked about we specifically sacrificed like after my second son was born, we knew like and we had basically at that point like about a year, like 9 months until I was like, my military contract was done. And we were like, we are moving, we're going to be full-time in business, all the things. And so we knew for like a period of time that our personal relationship was taking a little bit of a backseat. We're like, and we, not to say that's the answer for everybody, but we came up with that because we were like, all right, do we have time to go on like a bunch of date nights no, because like after the kids go to bed, we're working, we're recording podcasts, we're getting ready for all these things for our future. But we kept that like, we knew that going in. So we knew that, hey, we can't sacrifice our kids. You have to take care of your children, right? I still was working my full-time job. I couldn't sacrifice things with my clients. So where did things fall off? Yeah, I did less things with my spouse during those 9 months. And we were kind of like on the same page about that because sometimes I think people think that you can just like have it all the time. And that's just not the case. Like balance has to kind of ebb and flow. And for us, that's kind of where we found those extra times to work during that time period. And then we knew, hey, when we have more time, we're going to implement monthly date nights and we'll like, now I don't take calls at night, barely ever. Right. And so we actually get to hang out after the kids go to bed. And so I think it's important to note that like you said earlier, balance is different for everybody. And I knew that, hey, if I get a couple hours with my family in the afternoon, that fills my cup and I'm ready to go back to work. But you just can't have everything all the time. Like it's impossible. There has to be sacrifices somewhere, you
I
know?
think that people view their business very differently than like their health and fitness journey, right? And it's kind of like, oh, well, I hit my macros, but I got all of my protein from protein bars. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're ultimately not going to have like the body that you truly want by doing that. Or whatever, right? Like I could, keep going. But I think that when we start business, and I don't really know like what it is about this, but I still work with clients who just assume they may not say it out loud. But after 30 days of effort, they think they should be so much further along than they are, right? Or they think because they worked 7 days a week for 4 weeks in a row, they should have more, right? And I also think it's really important to say that, like, no one cares how hard you work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's the hardest thing about entrepreneurship is like just because you work hard doesn't mean that you're going to get results. And I think that's a bold statement to say, but I think that so many coaches are working hard in the wrong areas of their business because they don't have direction, they're not following any kind of strategies, they're spending more time overthinking than doing, right? Because I think that, if you add up all of the time a week that you spend stressing, worrying, overthinking, like that ends up being really significant for holding people back too. And one of the things that I loved about working with you and love about working with you is that sure, we have hard times. We have hard moments. There are times when I get a 3-minute voice memo. I know you're having a hard day, but you've always worked through them, right? Like you've never been one to just sit in the suck and like in the emotional suck. And you've been very great with navigating just emotional regularity and whatnot. And I think that's very important to say too.
Yeah. I think there's a sense of like, sometimes I notice, and maybe it's just because I feel like I came from a place where I never thought that what I'm currently doing would be possible, but I literally feel so grateful every single day. Like every time I get a new client, I'm like, I'm so grateful that someone like so honored that they want to hire me to help them on their journey. And I think a lot of people can start to feel entitled, like you said, like, oh, I worked for 7 days in a row, like 4 weeks straight. I should be getting clients. I should be doing this. And like, I feel like there shouldn't be a sense of entitlement when you're running your business. It's like you're putting in the work but ultimately your goal is to help people, right? And so like when people see that like you are somebody who could potentially help them and change their life forever, like that's a really big honor to me. You know what I mean? And so I think that I really try to like stay humble and grateful and that I'm truly able to show up and do what I love to do every single day. Because if I'm not doing that, then what's the point of all of this? You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to dive into the strategies a little bit, right? A few things that we've done. And I want to talk about things that are overrated and underrated.
Okay.
So I want to ask you first. We're talking about like business advice. So I think we've alluded to it, but Lindsay is a coach in FCA now because she has just been phenomenal and really building a stable business. And again, I always look for leadership, emotional regulation, all of those things. And uh, I want to start with like underrated business
Okay.
advice. So, what is one thing that you feel like is very underrated that's helped you in your business?
Well, I would say this is like so lame, I feel like, but just consistency, just consistently being there, consistently showing up, like showing your face on social media, and also just, again, being grateful and taking the clients that you do have, treating them like very well. Like they're the people that are going to go out and get you referrals, that are going to get those transformations. Like they should be your literal top priority. You know what I mean? So like my clients hopefully know that they are my top priority, and like I'm always like receptive to them. Obviously we have boundaries, but I feel like that's underrated, is just like doing those basic things, like making sure people are taken care of and just kind of showing up consistently, even if it's like a hard week or whatever. Like you don't just ghost on social media for like a week or 2 weeks. Like you still have to show up and like be there, or else I feel like the ebb and flow is just, it doesn't work out in your favor, if that makes sense.
It's really easy to have a job that you hate, but still walk in because you know you're going to get a paycheck, right? You can have
Hmm.
days that kind of suck a little bit, but you know you're still going to get paid either way. Whereas in business, it's not the same luxury. You can't just not show up or show up at 100%, right? And that may sound harsh, but it's the reality of it. And especially those first few years, because that's where you develop your traction and that's where you build your roots. I think that if you scale, there is such a thing as scaling too slow, right? Like if you're getting one client every 4 months, we've got a problem. Like we've got to move faster somewhere, right? Now it's okay to hit a level and kind of hang out there for a bit and stabilize, but like we've got to build traction faster. So you mentioned consistency and showing up, right? And so I know that you were somebody that wasn't like, I love the camera. I love my content. I love writing. Like that was never you. And so how did you show up consistently? Tell me the two things that you did consistently that you think really helped you scale. Aside from client delivery, let's talk about like marketing and sales.
I think that I always like showed up in my stories in some shape or form, whether it's like sharing about clients, or, and sometimes I know you've mentioned this before. Sometimes I didn't feel like showing up on camera. Like I think we all have those days where it's like, okay, maybe it's just not a bad day, especially when we're going through adrenal issues. I felt like my face is always super puffy. I'm like, I just don't feel like being on camera today. But it doesn't mean you can't show up. So I would share like text overlays and stuff like that. And I would share stuff about my personal life. You know what I mean? That's something that I did. And then I guess just DMing, like I'm always answering people in the DMs. There might be some times I took off of sourcing, you know what I mean? But I try to make sure that whenever I had conversations going, that again, those people were not left on red for like 4 days at a time. You know what I mean? Because that's not going to do any good trying to build rapport in those relationships. I think another thing that's underrated is being vulnerable. I think a lot of people on social media think that they have to be this like perfect, perfect physique, perfect macros, all these things in order for someone to be able to hire them or see them as an authority figure. But I think once I started being more vulnerable about like some of the struggles that I was going through, I actually drew in more clients because people were like, you're kind of relatable. Like I relate to what you're saying. You've been through that. You are getting guidance. You're coming out on the other side. Like I want somebody who's also been through struggles too, not somebody who's had like just this perfect like health and fitness journey this whole time. And I think people are scared to share the more vulnerable stuff. And everybody has that. Like nobody's life is perfect, you know?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like I always say, like you are an extension of your business, right? And so and I struggled with this for a long time, and I think it's because being in news, I already was showing up unlike me, right? Like I had to fit into this mold. And so there was like TV Taylor and then me, but I was always this person. So when I started my business, with the fitness, it felt pretty natural because that was already very much me, but the business felt really weird. And that's when the Sun Hat era was born. But, jokes aside, like I look at photos from 2020, early 2021, and I'm like, that's not even what I actually wore. Like, what was I doing? But I thought I had to fit in a certain mold for people to accept me. And it's like, once I just let that guard down, then it just felt so different. Now, you're talking about vulnerability in a different way, though, not just like the aesthetics, but if we're all human, okay? Like we go off of our macros, we go a little overboard sometimes, we don't hit our steps. Like sharing those days where you screw up, right? Like I was just on my story yesterday talking about me procrastinating when nobody probably ever thinks I procrastinate. Like we all do these things. It's just about you have a better way of bouncing back than somebody who needs to hire you. That's the difference. And so whenever people really relate to you, they obviously connect. And that's why I think you've been so great, especially this last year, at really involving your family more in your stories. And I know that was a challenge for you because you were like, I don't really know how much I should show. Will they want to see this? And I was like, yes. Aren't like all of your clients' parents? Like, yes, put that in there. So I think so, absolutely. Um, okay, tell me something that is overrated. Overrated business advice.
Well, hmm, there's a lot. So I think in the beginning, something that I tried or something that I thought that I had to try to do to be successful was like a low ticket, very low ticket group offer, something that was like more membership style where it was like, I don't know, 20 bucks a month, 30 bucks a month or whatever. And I was like, I can just get all these people, which may work for some people, but I'm not an influencer. So it didn't work for me. And I was like, that's just too much. It's not good advice. I don't think.
I agree,
Unless you're a
100%.
certain
100%. It would take a lot to convince me that anyone should do that. Yes.
yeah, yeah. Overrated advice too. Like I think that there's so much out there from like social media experts about like what you should be posting and like you got to post this, you got to post that, you got to do talking head reels, you got to do blah, blah, blah. And in my experience, and I'm not a social media expert, but I think people can tell when you're showing up authentically or not. So I think like if you force yourself to do talking head reels or like voiceover reels, but it shows that you're not like enjoying it, like, do you know what I mean? If you're not
Well,
like
yeah,
showing
there
up.
are people that look very uncomfortable on camera. And like,
Yeah.
if you do feel that way, if you were listening and you're like, that is me, I do not feel comfortable on camera. I need you on your stories more because your audience connects with you the best with voice and like video,
Mhm.
right? But I think like one that goes in hand with what you're saying too is because I think messy action and just repetition works with content 100%. Like have a
Yeah.
mix of video and not video and like we'll work out the kinks. But I think chasing engagement, like the wrong kind of engagement, is really to me overrated. Like chasing the likes, the follows, that kind of stuff to
Always.
me. Um, because I've never, ever, 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 ever to this day had a client who went viral make money from it.
Yeah, that's true.
I've still never had that in all the 5 years. I've not seen that once. Maybe a sale, but like, nope. Um, I think one overrated is like the 0 to 10K in 90 days. I think hitting a 10K month is overrated in
Yeah.
general because people think like, oh, when I hit 10K, like I've made it. I can chill, I can coast.
Yeah. Which it's funny because it can't be further from the truth because if you're actually at the point where you're bringing in consistent 10K months, like you should probably be having a lot of work to do. Like, so I remember like a funny, so like after I left like my full-time job, I remember like kind of complaining to you and I was like, I'm confused. I thought I was going to have so much time to do all the things I never got to do. And I'm still like, there's still things that are falling off of my to-do list. Like, how do I not, I think people have in their mind, like, oh, once I do this, once I do that, then I'll just have all this time. I'll be able to get everything done. But no, but as you consistently scale too, you get more clients and you kind of add more things to your to-do list and you grow and maybe you have a
It
podcast or
changes.
email list. There's just more things to do. So yeah, no, I think that getting to 10K months is like, it's a cool checkpoint, like for sure. Like that's amazing. But is that like the gold standard or like, oh, once I'm there, I've made it. Well, you're still going to be working pretty damn hard, making 10K months, or you should be.
Well, and that's, I don't know why I use that, but I feel like that is truly the number in my head that I hear most frequently, where if you hit a 10K month, then you're going to be coasting. And I bring that up on this podcast because I know so many moms, including yourself, and you've never once told me like I want to make $1 million. And whether or not you want a level of freedom that equates to that or not is not the point of this. The point is you've always said, I want more time with my kids. I want more time with my family, XYZ, which is what people want in general, not even just people that, I mean, I want that too, right? I think we all want more freedom, time freedom. And people think that they're going to get that at 10K, right? And it's like 10K to me is where the work really starts. That's where you're like, okay, I've got a business now. Now what? And the moms in particular that want more freedom but don't want a 7-figure business, your margins will take a bigger hit. That is the only way to make that make sense. Like, I think
100%.
avoiding hiring a VA, avoiding hiring a setter, whatever it is, right? Like, if you truly want a business that is kind of on autopilot, sans, check-ins and check-in days, right? Then you're going to be outsourcing a lot of things. You're going to be outsourcing editing and this and that. But if you are trying to build something bigger and your idea of more freedom is, maybe a second house or a bigger family or more vacations, you're going to need a lot more than 10K a month.
Yeah, because you're going to have to outsource more. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I 100% agree. And that was actually something that I really appreciated you kind of supporting me with through this journey, was like, there was times where I knew that I was like, I feel like I'm working so much. I don't know how I can possibly scale if I don't have help. And maybe it wouldn't have been, maybe I wasn't at the exact monetary point that you would recommend everybody hire a VA or whatever, but it was the right point for me because I knew with everything I had going on, and like I was not willing to give up all my time with my family while scaling my business. So it was like, I just need some help. And so I think you really did a good job in like coming to my level and helping me figure out like, all right, now is the time to bring, and yeah, my margins took a hit, but ultimately that helped me in the end because I was able to scale more past that. And I don't think I would have been able to if I hadn't brought on help at that time. But speaking of help too, I think, I don't know if you hear this a lot, but a lot of moms that I hear that are trying to grow a business, this goes back to wanting to have it all. And this might be a very like, maybe like a controversial thing to say, but like, I think you have to be very clear about what you want and what you want your life to look like, because I personally don't think it's possible to run a successful six-figure, multi-six-figure business without having any help with childcare. It's it would be extremely hard. And I think that a lot of people think, again, that we can have it all. But it's like, if you want to have a hobby and you want to make a couple $1,000s a month and spend, be a stay-at-home mom, that's awesome. But just know that that's like, that's what you want. That's your vision. And we can help support that, right? As long as you know that going in. But I mean, there are times where like my kids are homesick and I kind of have to like do it all, of course, but it's having that separation where like when they're home and I'm trying to run my business, I don't feel like I'm a great mom and I don't feel like I'm a great business owner because I'm like trying to split too many too many things, you know what I mean? You can't focus. And it's just a time commitment. I mean, how can I work 30, 40 hours a week while my kids are home all day? And like I personally don't think that's fair to them in my situation, right? So I think that's something that moms specifically have to think about, which is difficult because then it brings in that mom guilt like you were talking about in the beginning. And it's like, how do we make sure that we're still getting that time with our kids that we really want, and actually enjoying that time with them? You know what I mean? So it's a balance that everyone I think has to figure out for themselves.
And not to say, again, like, I am not a parent, so obviously, take what I say with a grain of salt, but most of the parents I work with, they're more than willing to sacrifice more time in the first few years of their kids' lives in order to never miss a game in the future, in order to make sure they're there for all those things. And again, that's not me saying neglect your children. Obviously, I don't really want to say any more disclaimers, but I see the same thing with people that maybe are struggling with getting into relationships, right? Like, they're really struggling to just navigate setting time aside because, like, I'm somebody that like has not been in a relationship since starting my business. And I know that whenever that day comes, that's going to be an adjustment for me too. Like, I'm probably going to feel like a shitty girlfriend for a bit because I'm not used to setting aside time for anyone else because it's really just me. And so, that's where that challenge comes in. And like you said, it's not going to be a perfect 50-50 split at all. It's going to feel very 90-10 on some days, and maybe some days it is 50-50. But I think that in the future, your kids will be so grateful for everything that you've done for them. And I don't think you're ever going to feel like you missed out on anything. Um, so the last thing I want to ask you is, what would you say has been your biggest like aha moment working together?
Honestly, I think just knowing that you have consistent support and accountability. Because I'm definitely one of those people that I'm like, okay, if I'm paying for something, like I'm going to utilize it. Like, you know what I mean? I'm going to get as most out of this experience as I possibly can. So I think that some of the things that you've taught me, and obviously we've talked about some more advanced strategies and things like that, but knowing that when I start getting some crazy ideas, like you bring me back to, okay, let's just make sure we're focusing on the basics. Are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And it's really helpful because I think I can tend to be like a little bit of a dreamer, which is not a bad thing. I think like it's nice to have like ideas and stuff, but get coming back down to earth and being like, okay, if you want this, like this is how we actually make this happen. Here's the data, here's the levers that we need to pull in order to kind of like get you to that. So I think it's really like you're almost like a grounding for me, if that makes sense. Keeping me consistent, like keeping me accountable to the things that actually propel your business forward instead of being kind of distracted by this like shiny object syndrome,
And that's
you
so
know?
normal though. Like anyone listening that relates to Lindsay on that, we are all visionaries. Entrepreneurs are visionaries. And I find that it's so easy to get caught up in what you want 12 months from now that you don't implement today stuff. And I will tell you, even myself, like the reason I have continued to grow and grow and grow is because I continue to just master the shit out of the basics. You know what I mean? Like if you don't master the basics, and I say basics, I mean DM strategy, marketing, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, right? Efficiency, emotional regulation. If you don't focus on that, you don't have a foundation to scale, because the people that I see that scale the fastest, usually, not always, but oftentimes are the ones that plummet the fastest as well, because they get this new money, they don't know how to keep it, they overspend, little things like that. So I think that last thing, because you said it, I think an underrated piece of advice is data tracking.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Yeah.
like tracking data. And I think that so many people avoid it because they're like, what do I track? How do I do it? Like, just, I mean, it's amazing how many business owners don't know how much money they make in a month because they just either rely on Stripe or they're not sure or, they have no idea.
I can't imagine, and I think this is just because, like, of the person that I am, but I've always been very, like, financially, like, numbers driven, obviously, based on my educational background, things that I'm more, like, interested in, but, like, I love data. I think the where you also help me with that is, like, okay, well, I have all this data, well, how do I actually use it? Like, what does this mean? Okay, well, like, my click rate was this for my emails, like, or whatever, you know what I mean? So I think having somebody who's always multiple steps ahead, somebody who always invests in their own like learning and experience and how to grow their own business. That's what I love getting from you. And also like you're still on the ground like doing the dirty work. Like you don't like just because you have a multi-million dollar business now doesn't mean that you're not in the DMs or that you're not on your stories, that you're not posting content or whatever. Like you still do like all the things that we do just at, a higher level, so I really appreciate that about you because it's not like you're not just telling people that they should be doing something, you're actually doing it. You're setting that example and like honestly just being like a leader. You know what I mean?
It's a little more
I think that's
relatable
really
that
important.
way.
Yeah, I don't think like, obviously being in the military for so long, those are the things that you learn about leadership from the very beginning. Like you can't just like show up and tell people to do something. Like no one's going to listen to you, no one's going to respect you no matter what your rank is or whatever. You have to like show them that you know what you're talking about, that you if they're supposed to be doing something that you know exactly how to do that and you might be able to do it better than them if you are getting in the ground and doing that work as well. So I just really appreciate the leadership style and, constantly just like setting the example for us. And I love like whenever you have a meeting with Will, I'm like so excited to hear about like what you guys talk about afterwards. Cause I'm like, all right, like we're gonna get the good stuff. This is
So
great.
it's so funny. My my team members, anytime like I
I
start
hate
rapid firing things, they're just like, did you just have a call with him? Like, is this what we're getting? Like, got it. And then it's funny
feel
you
like
say that because like Brenda and a few of my other clients are going to be like, what are we talking about this week? Like, it's so funny, but I agree. I think, and this is like unrelated, but something that I can bring up because you've been with me for so long is like, I can't imagine having like a different coach every 6 months. love having a mentor that I know will continue growing, and I'm like growing kind of under that person, because
Yeah.
it's just so motivating. Like, I'm such a lifer person. Like, if I love somebody, then I'm not leaving unless something drastically needs to change. But I think so many coaches are chasing like the shiniest object or the blue check marks and things like that. And regardless of who you work with, just make sure that that person is not just a 4 month container, a 6 month container. Like, who can you work with and latch onto? Whose business do you really enjoy? Right. And you may not want the same business. That's definitely not why you should hire a mentor. But, just finding somebody that you can be a ride or die with, because to me, the mentorship only gets better the longer you stay with somebody, because there's more trust, there's more respect, like just the relationship develops. And I think that that is something that people really don't look at.
Yeah. And they know the ins and outs of your business, and they're not trying to treat you like a cookie cutter like everyone else. Like, I mean, you know so much about me, my family, my goals, my dreams, like my business. Like, I feel like anything that I bring to the table, like we could just work through it and not have to go, okay, we're starting at square one. Like, you already know all these things, you know? So, yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. You've slept in my house. So
I have, I have good times.
you're like, you literally know where I'm at right now in my house. But Lindsay, I appreciate you hanging out. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have, or any last minute tips for the moms listening, or just business owners that are getting started?
I think I would just say, like, especially for the moms, because I know, like, I relate obviously mostly to moms and parents. I think that, like, it can be really challenging trying to divide your time and figuring out, like, what's important. But I think, like, if you can just do that, if you can just really think on it for like a couple days or whatever, you talk to your partner and you're like, all right, what's the goal here? Like, what do we want? What do we want life to look like? And work backwards from that. Just know that you're always working towards that. And it's the coolest thing in the world that, like, my husband and I actually opened a bottle of wine a couple weeks ago that we've been saving for years, because years ago we had like a vision. And we didn't know exactly what it would look like, or like, specific things may change over time, but the ultimate vision where we both had more autonomy and flexible schedules and, things like that. And we live in the place where we want to live now and all these things, like that has come true. And so it's like, holy shit, like this moment of the things you've been working towards for multiple years are actually here. It's just very cool. And so I think having a vision in mind, and then just knowing that, like, especially as a mom, there's going to be sacrifices, you know what I mean? And on the daycare or childcare aspect, I think looking at it in a way that as long as the time that you do get to spend with your kids, I pick my kids up around like 3 o'clock every day. And I know that from that time when I pick them up to when they go to bed, that's like when my mom hat is on, and I know that before that it's business time. And after that, it's my mom time. We go to soccer practice, we do all the things. And I feel like I have so much more balance than I ever did before, because I have more flexibility now. And it's just really cool. So just challenging the thinking around like what people want and then the steps to getting there.
And the
So,
fact that this was a like multi-year transformation for you. This isn't like an overnight thing. I think that's really important to know, because once you start to get that bigger roster or those bigger months, it takes a bit to adjust to it for a second. Cause usually it like there's like ebbs and flows with the scale, right? Like sometimes it's like, oh, I just got my first 3K really fast. And then it's kind of slower to 5. And then, oh my God, we jumped to 8. Okay. Now I have a 6-figure business. Like, what now? Right. So I just love that you've always prioritized consistency. You've always prioritized stability, and you're not making rash decisions. Like, you've literally been selling the same offer over and over and over again. And I think that is also underrated, which we didn't talk about, but you haven't changed your offer every year. But anyway, I appreciate you hanging out with me, and I will link your Instagram handle below. So if any of you guys want to connect with Lindsay, then you can kind of go stalk her page.
all right. Thank you for having me.
Bye.